What is the most overrated watch brand today? Well, you're probably going to be pretty surprised by my answer. If you've been a fan of watches long enough, you've likely built up a mental list of watch brands that you personally think are overrated by the watch community. These are brands that you just personally don't see the hype in, brands that you think get a pass by most collectors despite some noticeable flaws. Before I share my pick for the most overrated watch brand today, I want to be clear about what overrated actually means in my opinion. This isn't about a brand making bad watches or even brands offering bad value for money. Overrated to me really just means that the reputation by the watch community has outgrown the brand itself and the watches that they are producing. And I want to be clear, a brand can still make great watches and still be overrated in my opinion. Those aren't mutually exclusive things. So here's how today's video is going to work. I'm going to share 3 honorable mentions for the most overrated watch brands today, and then share my pick for the most overrated watch brand. And like I said, I don't think you're going to expect my answer for the most overrated watch brand today. Now, before I hop into the first honorable mention, please let me know in the comments section down below what brand you think is the most overrated today. I'm very curious to see what you all have to say. Okay, so the first honorable mention for the most overrated watch brand today is Tissot. And Tissot has had a great run of attention really over the past 5 years or so, starting with the reissue or the relaunch of the Tissot PRX back in 2021. And I start by talking about the PRX because I think you really can't talk about Tissot and the recent success of the brand without talking about that watch. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've seen this watch on the wrist of people that aren't really into the hobby of watches, but just really wanted a solid watch and must have seen the advertising and all the hype around it. And the PRX was a genuinely revolutionary watch for the time when it came out, offering that integrated bracelet style that we love on watches like the Patek Philippe Nautilus and Audemars Piguet Royal Oak for a relatively affordable price. And although the PRX has been a huge success for the brand, I think it has led to a lot of attention for Tissot that is actually kind of undeserved in some ways. First and foremost, and this is definitely a personal thing, but the PRX became so popular that it almost felt like it was being shoved down our throats, and honestly, I've never really been a huge fan of the PRX. It seemed like no matter where you looked, whether it was social media, forum pages, lists, articles, you saw the Tissot PRX mentioned. And in my opinion, that watch, despite being a financial success for the brand, really isn't that special. For whatever reason, most of the world just seemed to click with the watch. And again, there's nothing really wrong with it, but I think the attention Tissot received because of this watch is really outsized to the quality that the PRX and the greater catalog have. And that really brings me to my second point, which is that the Tissot catalog in general, to me, isn't super exciting. And again, this is a personal choice and a personal thought here, and really all the brands that I'm going to mention on this list are, of course, my own personal opinion. But when I talk about the Tissot catalog, I really just don't get that excited. When I look at the Tissot catalog and look at watches like the Gentleman and the Sea Star and other watches, it just doesn't seem particularly special compared to other brands even within the Swatch group, like Mito or Rado or Hamilton or any of these other brands. And the fact that Tissot in particular has really the most attention out of those brands, to me, just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And like I said in the introduction, just because a brand is deemed overrated, in my opinion, it doesn't mean I think they make bad watches. And Tissot is a great example of that. And I don't think they make bad watches at all. I just think that they're a little bit more popular than I think they maybe should be. I just don't think they should be the automatic choice when recommending someone's first sort of entry-level Swiss mechanical watch. Many of the brands, even within the Swatch Group family, like I said, offer a very similar value for money and some interesting looks and designs that are going to be different from what Tissot offers. Okay, so my second honorable mention for the most overrated watch brand today, and again, this is my personal opinion, and I reiterate that one more time because I think this one might ruffle some feathers, but it's Christopher Ward. So I think Christopher Ward really does make some awesome and great quality watches, and if you said otherwise, I think you would truly be misinformed. And despite making truly great watches, and again, this is going to be a relatively hot take, I think they receive almost too much love from the watch community compared to many other micro brands out there. It seems Christopher Ward has taken on the mantle of king of the micro brands, and in many ways they've actually sort of transcended that title of a micro brand just because they've really exceeded what most expect in a micro brand in terms of volume and scale. And even though they are becoming closer to a big brand, they still get sort of the benefit of the doubt and love that a micro brand might get. And I think that's really where I get a little confused by Christopher Ward as a brand, because when you're looking at the most highly recommended micro brand watches, they're always going to show up on those types of lists. But in my opinion, they should really be compared more closely to the bigger brands. For For some reason, I think about it almost being like a pro athlete playing in a league full of amateurs. They just feel like they're on a different level than the rest of the micro brands. And again, I don't even know if they would be truly considered a micro brand at this point. And even beyond that, again, personally, I just don't love their catalog as much as maybe others do. They definitely make great watches, like I said. Watches like the C60 Trident and the 12 are really cool watches, and I know they're really high quality. But every time I go to a watch show and I see their booth just overrun with people, I'm always just a bit confused by that. Watches like the Christopher Ward 12 are a perfect example of watches that are definitely high quality, but in my opinion aren't super original, and yet get so much love and respect from the watch community. I mean, that watch in particular is an integrated sport watch, but there's nothing really particularly different or interesting about that compared to other brands, and yet it seems to get so much more love because it's from Christopher Ward. And very often, Christopher Ward will have homage type watches in their catalog, pieces that are just not super original, and yet again, they get so much love and respect from the community. But if another micro brand did that, I think they would receive a lot more flack for being super unoriginal. And I understand that Christopher Ward does have a place in the watch world, right? If you're someone who wants something like a Rolex Oyster Perpetual with a fun, colorful dial, and you can't afford it, something like the Sealander is a great option for you. So again, I think they have a true reason for existing, but I don't think they receive enough flack for being not super original. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say in the comment section down below about my opinion on Christopher Ward. So let me know if I'm off base. I'm really curious to see what you have to say about it. And like I said, Christopher Ward does make great watches. No one is disputing that, but I just think they're a bit overhyped. Okay, so my third honorable mention for the most overrated watch brand today, and you probably saw this one coming, but it's Rolex. Rolex's inclusion on this list is definitely an interesting one for me because I am a fan of Rolex. Maybe not a true fanboy where I love everything that they do, but I am a fan and do own one myself with the Rolex Explorer. And despite being a fan, I have to admit Rolex truly is overhyped and overrated in a lot of different ways. And they were really close to being my choice for the most overrated brand today, so stay tuned for that choice, but they ended up being an honorable mention, of course. And here's the thing, Rolex is probably the ultimate example of a brand that is overrated and yet does make really high quality watches. I don't think any hater of Rolex would admit that they actually make bad watches. At the end of the day, they are a luxury brand with a very high standard for what they make. And despite having some controversies over the past couple of years, like the issues with the 32 series of movements, they do make some great watches. But this is maybe the best example of a brand just truly being overhyped by the watch community, and really more so, I think, casual fans of watches, because at the end of the day, Rolex is probably the most popular watch brand maybe on the planet, and that has led to really inflated secondary prices, and I don't think that the watches that they produce, despite being high quality, are worthy of those prices. When you look at an example from Rolex, let's say something like the Rolex Submariner, you could probably convince me that the retail price of $11,000 is worth it for that watch. That might be a bit of a stretch, but you could probably convince me of that. But when you look at the secondhand market and you see that watch going for nearly double what the retail price is, you really have to question whether that is truly worth it. And I think the answer is unequivocally no, it is not worth it. But it just doesn't make any sense to me because, again, despite making spectacular watches, the competitors to Rolex, like Omega, like Glasuta, like really any brand in that sort of general space, they make very similar quality watches. And I think if you want something like a Rolex Submariner, you will not be disappointed by picking up an Omega Seamaster or a Glasuta Original CQ. Like, those are very good watches as well, and they should really be given the same respect and admiration on the secondhand market as a Rolex. But again, it's just that sort of artificial scarcity that comes into play, and all of a sudden Rolex is just overhyped and people love it more than they probably should. So yeah, it really is that scarcity, or artificial scarcity really, that kind of combines with the overall brand reputation and hype that really makes the brand overrated in my opinion. I think despite them making such amazing watches that are very high quality, the hype that surrounds the brand is even greater than the quality that they provide. And again, I say that as someone who is a fan of Rolex and is on a waitlist for a Rolex, and I can still admit that, in my opinion, that the hype surrounding the brand is probably greater than maybe it should actually be. Okay, so what is my pick for the most overrated watch brand today? Well, my choice would easily be Seiko. For many years, if someone asked the question, who produces the best value for money watches in the industry, you would say Seiko, but that time has long since passed. Buying a Seiko today is not the same experience as buying a Seiko from 10 years ago. And if I'm being honest, this is probably the only example in this video of a brand that in my opinion is overhyped and also probably offers subpar value for money. It feels like Seiko built up such a strong reputation of offering great designed, value for money watches, and they just don't really seem to offer that anymore in my opinion. As I said, gone are the days of buying really high quality Seiko watches for under $500. Watches like the Seiko Sarb lineup, which were really like the king of the catalog in terms of offering such amazing value, don't exist in the catalog anymore. Nowadays, if you want to buy a half-decent Seiko, you're likely going to have to spend closer to $1,000, and even then you might be underwhelmed by the overall quality. Watches like the Seiko Speed Timer and the Alpinist are legitimately interesting looking watches, but again, I think you can get better value for money elsewhere in the watch world. Combine that with the fact that Seiko loves to celebrate their heritage and tout their amazing history by making countless reissues and special editions, and it just gets honestly very overwhelming. I'm always just a bit underwhelmed by the Seiko releases and think that for the overall distribution power that they have and the overall scale that they have with the amazing history and backlog of watches that they have, they should be making higher quality pieces. And I'm not sure if it's because they want to separate themselves from Grand Seiko and want to make sure that there's a noticeable difference between the quality of a Seiko and a Grand Seiko, or what it is exactly, but like I said, overall, I find myself being a bit underwhelmed. And similar to the situation with Christopher Ward, where they seem to be mentioned in really every conversation about microbrand watches, Seiko is pretty much always mentioned on every list for the best watches under $1,000, under $2,000, and like I said, I just don't really think that they offer that level of quality where they should be mentioned all of the time. Again, I will admit that they make really interesting watches, they have a great back catalog of historic pieces, and I think that really does make them very special. But I think if you want a very high quality watch, let's say under $1,000, which is really their bread and butter allegedly, then I think you would definitely be better off going in a different direction. But yeah, that is my breakdown of the most overrated watch brands today. I know some of the choices in this video might be a bit controversial, and it definitely has a lot of personal bias involved, but let me know in the comment section down below what you think of my choices and what you think of the brands I mentioned, and of course what brand you personally think is the most overrated today. And one more time, I just want to reiterate that the brands I mentioned in this video are still great brands and still produce really outstanding watches. I just think that they are a bit overhyped or overrated in the watch world right now. If you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you can give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you very much.